Hello, friends. Today you will hear a confession that tests loyalty and trust in a single room. This is the private studio where Luca and Alex confront a truth they've kept under glass. A sealed envelope on the desk. Behind that envelope lies a forbidden attraction and the decisions it forces. The scene makes the calm reveal itself as risk, and the risk as consequence. Watch closely. The studio hums softly, city lights threading through the glass. Luca Verdi sits with his notebook open, but his pen rests, waiting for the moment the subject names what he's been avoiding. Opposite him, Alex Carter leans forward, the glow from the monitor tracing the lines of his face, a mask of control slipping somewhere around the eyes. Luca's voice is even, coaxing. Now, tell me something you've never spoken aloud. The room tightens, a held breath passing between them and the street beyond the glass. Alex meets the gaze, then speaks of balance, the years he learned to measure himself. To keep the private chamber of his life shut behind doors others never knock. And then, abruptly, the restraint cracks. There is a pull I've learned to name only in whispers, he says. A forbidden attraction to Mira. Silence swells, thick as the city night outside. Luca's pen hovers. The word forbidden lands on the page like a stone dropped in a quiet pool. The confession changes the air. No longer a rumor or risk to be weighed, but a choice now under bright light. Alex's fingers brush the edge of a small envelope resting on the desk. Airless, sealed, the color of careful intent. It's the symbol that has traveled with him since the first feelings took root. The locked envelope that holds his own version of truth. He doesn't open it. Not yet. This envelope, he says, almost amused by how literal fear can be, isn't about Mira alone. It's about what I do with truth when it might hurt her, or you, or Najiya, or anyone who trusts me. Luca nods. Not the nod of agreement, but of acknowledgement. So you've kept a confession inside what could be another person's decision to bear for you. Exactly, Alex answers, voice steadier than his hands. The phrase lands, a hinge in the room. The dominant conflict isn't the desire itself, but the choice it forces. Reveal and risk wrecking lives, or stay with a lie dressed as caution. Outside, a bus sighs by, the city's murmur threaded with footsteps and distant sirens. Inside, the air tightens again, but this time with purpose. Alex's gaze hardens just a fraction, the internal fog lifting to expose a clear line. I'm not asking for permission to want what I shouldn't have, he says. But I am asking what honesty would demand of me tomorrow. If I choose to be someone Mira can believe in, or someone she must fear. The envelope remains closed, a mute question. Luca's eyes search Alex's, reading the tremor behind the resolve. And for now? For now, I say the truth is a responsibility, not a weapon. Alex answers. I will decide what to do with this truth, after I've faced what it costs to name it. The conversation pauses at the edge of action, the locked envelope a tangible ache between them. Mira flickers in the back of Alex's mind, a constellation he can't disentangle from his own map. The scene leaves a question suspended as the camera lingers on the glass wall, where shadows contend with light. Can honesty move you forward without tearing apart the people you're trying to protect? The studio hums with a quiet gravity. The host speaks, calm and clear, as if the city itself paused to listen. Rules spill from the lips. The consent, the withdrawal option, the care in editing, the vow against sensationalism. The camera catches the rim of a glass wall, the neon bleed of a city street, and then Mira appears in the frame. Just a silhouette at the edge of light, her features momentarily eclipsed by the flicker of passing traffic. The host shifts to a new topic, a murmur of social pressure threading through every phrase. Infidelity whispered in apartment hallways, reputations traded like rare coins, families that won't forget a scandal. The room tightens around the hero's shoulders. He pretends a shrug, but his fingers drum an impatient tattoo on the arm of his chair. In the glow, a single object sits between them. A locked envelope, its wax seal unbroken, its parchment pale as a secret. Mira's gaze is brief but electric, catching the edge of the envelope before she looks away. She's there, but not for long. A reminder that the room, for all its calm, is a theater of consequences. The host continues, laying down the terms as if they were architectural beams. The truth can heal, or it can hollow out the walls we think keep us safe. The audience's breath is a soft, restless soundtrack behind the glass. The hero leans forward, and the weight of the rules lands like a keystone on his tongue. He had rehearsed pride, hedged his steps with rationalizations, learned to call honesty a dangerous luxury. Now the word itself is a thing to carry. His pulse answers with a stubborn thrum, felt in his throat, in the way the city breathes through the room. He wants to speak, wants to unbind the unspoken, and yet the line between care and risk blurs into a single, stubborn ache. The envelope seems to breathe with him. The seal, a tiny, stubborn question. If he opens it, his truth will spill like ink. If he keeps it sealed, the truth becomes a lie of omission, a rhythm of restraint that may protect Mira, but hollow out the spaces between them. He looks at Mira, who has stepped closer, not to comfort, but to witness. Her eyes are wary, a map of nerves and boundaries he can't pretend to ignore. Do you know what you're asking of her? Of you, of this room? She seems to ask with the tilt of her head, the barest crease of her brow. The host's voice answers for him, a measured echo. Pressure from norms, the risk of ruin, the felt gaze of every neighbor who will weigh in, as if the city itself keeps score. A tremor passes through the hero, quick as a heartbeat in a heartbeat's own fear. He recalls the lie he told himself, that desire equals betrayal, that truth equals loss. Yet the room, the rules, the envelope, all insist on a different geometry. Boundaries drawn to protect, not merely to punish. The glass wall throws a shadow that crawls across the floor. A thread of red light catching on the envelope's edge, a banner of temptation and restraint. In that flicker, a choice begins to form. Not a grand, cinematic confession, but a quiet, stubborn boundary set. He reaches for the envelope, just a fraction, then withdraws. The symbol remains sealed. Not a weapon, but a line drawn in careful ink. He looks at Mira again, at the tremor in her lips that promises both honesty and care, and at Najiya's unseen, practical wisdom somewhere behind the camera, guiding the frame. Boundaries can be compassionate. He finally dares to think aloud, though the words are only a breath. He meets Mira's gaze, not with triumph, but with a pledge to protect the fragile trust between them, to test the limits of what can be shared and what must be left unsaid, for good reason. The host's voice softens, acknowledging the turn that is never a turn away from truth, only a turn toward responsibility. The scene leaves us with a question, suspended in the city's sigh. If honesty is a door, how wide can it open without letting harm spill through? The envelope remains, uncracked, a still point in the storm, and the answer, as always, lives in what comes next. The corridor was still. The city beyond the glass, a murmur of rain and distant horns. In the studio's dim afterglow, Alex Carter stood by his dark desk, the locked envelope catching the lamp's amber, a small, patient thing that refused to open. Rumors had a way of slipping through the vents, curling around ankles and warnings until they felt less like gossip and more like a verdict. Mira's name drifted in the air, not as a person, but as a risk, as if proximity to her could suddenly turn intentions into headlines. He felt the certainty slip, then tighten around him like a sleeve that fits too tightly and never loosens. The envelope remained shut, the metal seal a tiny obstacle between truth and harm. He pressed a finger to the seal, watching the edge catch the light, a self-imposed boundary he hadn't noticed until tonight. Some things deserved a lock, not a lecture. From the hallway, a voice, Najiya's, or perhaps just the echo of her words in his memory, poured into the room. Boundaries aren't cages, they're care dressed in restraint. Duty isn't a verdict against longing. It's a vow to keep others safe from what you cannot promise to shield from yourself. The words settled into him, not as absolution, but as a plan. He pictured Mira, the silhouette at the glass, the way the city's neon smeared her outline into something almost unreal. They had spoken once, a retreat from the noise, a talk that had skated around boundaries with careful, dangerous grace. Now, the rumor mill gnawed at her as fiercely as at him. If he spoke too much, if he confessed more than a careful truth, she would bear the brunt of the fallout in ways he could not guard against. He slid the envelope back into the drawer, paused, and pulled it out again as if to test his resolve. The act was small, almost theatrical, but it felt like an actual choice being formed in the quiet of the room. He wasn't ready to escalate. He was ready to stop the escalation from within his own reach. He would speak to Mira, not to broadcast, but to set a line in the sand. We can care, we can be honest, but we cannot blur the lines that protect others. The door clicked softly, and a shadow moved through the glass as Mira appeared in the reflection, a figure of warmth and caution. She spoke softly, not to him, but to the air between them. I know the rumors. I know what they threaten. If we walk this, we walk it with a map. Rules, boundaries, a safety net for everyone who might be harmed. Alex opened his mouth, then closed it, choosing words that would not bend under the weight of others' eyes. He spoke of care, of timing, of a conversation that would be private, careful, and clearly bounded by respect. The fear that had slicked his palms loosened, replaced by the steady pressure of a plan forming, not to hide, but to guard. The envelope remained on the desk, still locked, still a symbol of what could happen if trust was broken. Mira's gaze searched his face, not demanding, but asking, "Will you protect us with the same attention you give to your own truth?" The scene pressed forward in uneasy silence, the air thick with the possibility of honesty without surrender. He found his breath steady and met Mira's eyes with the first deliberate boundary he could offer, a promise that truth would travel with care, that desire would be acknowledged only within limits that protect others. And so the question hung between them, unspoken and heavy as glass. Can he keep holding the line and still keep Mira's trust if the price is patience, distance, and measured confession? The locked envelope loomed as a reminder that some doors should stay closed, and that choosing not to unlock them might be the truest act of care he could offer. The studio breathes with a hush of rain against glass. A desk lamp spills warm, practical light. The city's hum slides through the room like a distant tide. On the desk sits a single object, a small, sealed envelope. Old, stiff, a boundary that never opens in the presence of a camera, but now feels almost visible. A weight between them. Mira sits opposite, hands loose on her thighs, eyes steady, but wary. Alex leans forward, not touching the envelope, choosing presence over gesture. Alex, I owe you the truth, Mira. There's something between us I can't pretend isn't there. Mira, I know. I feel it in the space between our sentences. But rules exist for a reason, and I'm not naive about what people will say. Alex, the rumors aren't just noise. They're a threat to you, to everyone around us. And I'm tired of pretending the threat isn't real. I've spent nights weighing what honesty costs. The cost isn't me, it's you, it's Najiya, it's your own circle watching from the shadows. Mira's breath deepens, a tremor she masks with a composed calm. Mira, then tell me what you want to do. Don't hide behind ethics if you still want me in your life. Alex, I want to set a boundary, not vanish the attraction, not pretend I don't feel something real. I want to protect you from collateral damage, to protect your reputation as fiercely as I protect my own. The envelope, this envelope, keeps popping into my mind. It's the kept secret of a life I won't live again. I won't open it, not now, not here. The envelope's presence grows heavier, as if the symbol itself has teeth. Mira notices the dot of sweat at Alex's temple and allows a breath she hadn't intended to show. Mira, boundaries aren't guarantees. They're promises you'll slip around if the heat climbs again. Alex, then hear this. The boundary is not a retreat. It's a discipline. We continue the work, in the open, with consent, with care, with witnesses who won't twist what we do into a scandal. We speak plainly, we keep lines clear, we never pretend the world is a closet. Mira studies him, searching for a crack in the resolve she's fought to maintain. Her voice softens. Mira, if I'm to stay in this, if I'm to trust you, you'll tell me the truth, even when it hurts. No half-truths, no hedging. Alex, you deserve that. I've learned the hard way that honesty without boundaries is a lie of another kind. So, I'll tell you what I won't do. I won't put you at risk. I won't meet you alone after hours. I won't let this be a private confession that blinds others to your reality. If we move forward with light, not with shadows. The room seems to tilt toward silence, the rain sharpening the edges of the glass wall. Mira reaches for the envelope, closes her fingers around its seam, not to tear it, but to acknowledge the boundary it represents. Mira, and if your truth costs us something, our closeness, our sense of safety, will we still choose honesty then? Alex, if honesty costs us the easy comfort of secrecy, then so be it. I won't pretend I'm sacrificing you for some noble test of virtue. I'll own what I am, and I'll own what I'm not willing to become. A pause, loaded with the weight of choices made and not yet made. The line between them, once a blur, now begins to take form. Mira, then the line is drawn, not to sever what could be, but to guard what matters. If the ground shifts, we'll face it with the same clarity. The door to the room remains shut, the envelope untouched, yet its presence hums as a visible boundary. The truth remains owed to Mira too. Not to feed a storm we fear, but to reckon with the consequences honestly. Her gaze softens, but doesn't waver. If we disclose what was confessed here without consent or a care plan, we turn desire into scandal and harm Mira's trust. Her fingers hover over the envelope, then rest on its cool surface. This isn't censorship. It's a line we don't cross without consent and a plan that keeps her safe. He studies the envelope as if diagnosing a patient. We can acknowledge the attraction, name the risk of gossip, and refuse to illuminate details that would drag Mira into exposure she didn't choose. His voice lowers, warmth seeping in. Honesty framed with boundaries. That's not avoidance. It's responsibility. Najiya exhales, a measured breath that steadies into resolve. Then we treat the envelope as a boundary, not a secret. We offer Mira a version of the truth, one that places her safety first and her choice to engage in any further disclosure second. The room narrows to the soft clockwork of breath, the city's murmurs slipping through the glass. The envelope's lock seems to gleam with reluctant relief. So the dominant choice is clear, Luca says, leaning in. We protect, we frame, we seek consensus before any deeper exposure. Najiya's mouth lifts in the faintest of smiles. And we prepare to explain, not to persuade, should Mira ask. They fall into a careful quiet, the tension easing into deliberate resolve. The question lingers like fog on a pane. What form must honesty take to protect those we care for? And who holds the pen to write it? The studio hums with a careful, intimate quiet. Outside, the city breathes in neon and rain. A locked envelope rests on the table between Najiya and Luca, its wax seal a small, stubborn accusation. I stand with my hands deep in my pockets, listening to the soft clock, listening to the scrape of my own pulse. Najiya's eyes are steady in the warm light. The lie isn't a weapon, Alex. It's a chain you wrapped around yourself to keep from naming what you fear. Luca tilts his head, not pressing, waiting. The envelope gleams as if it knows we're about to pry it open, not just to read, but to reveal the motive behind every discreet breath I've taken these weeks. I hear the confession I have rehearsed fall away from my tongue, not in words, but in the tremor of my breath. I told myself I was protecting Mira, protecting her from something I shouldn't say aloud. But protection isn't silence. It's clarity. The words land like a careful hammer strike, leaving a ring of heat in the air. The lie unravels in the room without a dramatic unraveling, no dramatic reveal, just the slow, inevitable slide of truth past fear. I glance at the envelope, at its locked mouth, and feel the weight of it. The boundary I've refused to admit exists. The seal feels less like a safeguard, more like a door I've kept closed to keep out what I feared would break me. Najiya's voice lowers to a measured tenderness. Honesty with boundaries is not betrayal. It's care. Care for Mira, for you, for the truth that won't stay quiet forever. She pushes the envelope forward, not to be opened as a release, but to be understood as a boundary marker. If you choose disclosure, do it with consent, do it with care, and do it with the plan to protect those who didn't ask to own your secret. The room tightens around me. The locked envelope becomes a symbol I cannot ignore. I steady my breath, feel the sting of guilt sharpen into resolve. I am not choosing secrecy tonight. I am choosing responsibility, even if every line I say costs something I hoped to keep. Then I will tell Mira, I say, and the words taste like cold steel. And I will set limits so her life, and Luca's, aren't crushed beneath the weight of my truth. There's a tremor in Najiya's smile, a nod from Luca. The room seems to exhale, as if the city itself has paused to listen. I lift my gaze to the glass, to the street beyond, where rain scribbles on the pane like a confession I can't quite erase. The envelope sits between us, still sealed, still a question. And the question lingers, not answered. Can honesty protect someone else if it costs us everything we wanted? The private studio hums with a soft, anxious tingle. City lights leaking through the glass as if the skyline itself holds its breath. The locked envelope sits in the middle of the table, its seal catching the lamp like a quiet dare. The hero, Alex, studies the seal with a finger resting at the edge of the paper, as if the act of touching could soften what it guards. A phone ping breaks the silence. Luca's eyes flick to the screen, Nadia's chair creaks as she leans forward. Outside, a siren threads through the night, a thin electric ache that makes the room feel smaller, more intimate. The external trigger arrives not with triumph, but with a tremor. The outside world pressing in. Rumors are already circulating. Luca says, voice steady but tired. A leak. The confession could go public any moment. Mira's name hangs in the air, like a fragile ornament. The thought of her hearing any part of this, of being dragged into a storm she never asked to enter, tightens a knot in Alex's chest. The envelope feels heavier in his hands, a tangible boundary between what he wants and what others must endure. Nadia's practical calm cuts through the tremor. Duty isn't punishment. It's protection. The space Mira has built around her life deserves safeguarding. We owe her a choice, not a crisis she didn't ask for. Alex takes a breath that tastes like metal and rain. The lie he's carried slips from his shoulders in a slow, painful surrender. If we tell her everything, we ruin her peace. The image she guards, the people she relies on. His gaze returns to the envelope, to the red thread of truth he's pretended wasn't taut between him and Mira. The thread binds two chairs in the room, two angles of a life he's learned to balance. It becomes the image of his own limits. He sets the envelope down. The sound is small, decisive. We set boundaries, not betrayals. We tell Mira the truth she needs, but we do it with care and with her consent. We ensure she isn't collateral in our own need to be seen as honest. Luca nods, not persuading but listening. Nadia's eyes soften, not giving in, but offering a path. Then we draft a transparent plan. Speak to Mira together. No leaks, no sensational framing. Boundaries first, consequences second. The words feel like keys sliding into locks. The room seems to hold its breath again as the external pressure presses closer. The city's distant roar. The rumor already shaping itself into headlines. Alex meets the eyes of both Mira and Luca, as if in that glass wall he can see the futures they might share or lose. He speaks with a quiet finality that surprises him. If we choose truth, we choose safety for her first. The truth has to belong to her as much as to us. The envelope remains closed, not a symbol of the lie it contains, but of the restraint they will show. A vow to tell Mira what she deserves to know, not what the world demands. The question that settled into the room, heavy as smoke, lingers in the air like the last note of a held breath. Can trust endure a boundary drawn for care? Or will it fracture the moment the truth becomes public? Outside, the siren fades. Inside, the dialogue begins to tilt toward responsibility. But the night leaves one question unanswered, hovering over the table like a sliver of light. Will Mira choose to trust within the limits they are about to set? Alex stands in the private studio, the city's neon bleeding through the glass like a slow heartbeat. The locked envelope sits between him and the others. Wax seal catching the lamplight, a quiet dare he can't quite swallow. Nadia's practical calm. Luca's clinical gaze, Mira's wary posture. They surround him. Not with judgment, but with the map of consequences. The red thread that runs between two chairs across the room seems to tighten as if tethering all three futures to one moment. I'm not here to spill secrets for the sake of spectacle, Alex says, the words rough in his throat. He finger combs the edge of the envelope, then settles his hand flat on the table, between the seal and the truth. There is something I owe you, Mira, and something I owe to you, Nadia, and to Luca, and to the life I'm pretending to keep clean. I've learned that honesty isn't a weapon. It's a boundary. Mira steps closer, the soft noise of her breath a small tremor in the room. The city's hum crawls through the glass, a distant siren threading the moment together with a thin electric ache. The trigger isn't your fault, Luca says gently, not looking away from Alex. The trigger is this: whether we admit the feeling or we pretend it doesn't exist. What you decide becomes a limit you can live within. Najiya nods once, precise and unyielding. Duty to protect the spaces Mira has built isn't a cage. It's a boundary. We seal certain things, not out of cruelty, but out of care. Alex meets Mira's eyes, and for a heartbeat the room stills. The lie he's confessed to wearing, the one where desire is a betrayal, where truth equals ruin, shrinks under the weight of his next words. He slides the envelope a fraction to the left, then closer to his own chest, as if to guard it from the world. Yet he does not tear it open. Instead, he speaks to Mira with a vigil's steadiness. From this moment, I'm choosing boundaries. Not because I don't want you. Not because I don't feel what I've felt. But because I won't let secrecy define us or corrupt what you deserve. I'll tell you the truth. But it will come in careful steps, with your consent, and only when it won't hollow out your life or others. Mira's jaw tightens, and her fingers work at the edge of her sleeve, as if testing sensation against fear. So, you're saying you'll end this without us deciding it together? Alex's breath catches. I'm saying the next step is your choice. If you want no more of this, if you want to pretend nothing happened, I'll respect that. If you want transparency and healing, we'll take it. But on terms that keep you safe. The room feels suddenly small and huge at once. The red thread between the chairs seems to pulse, a line that could either fray or fuse. The envelope remains closed, its hidden contents as suspended as the moment itself. He looks at Mira with measured calm, the dominant energy hovering in the space between them, as if the air itself holds its breath. What do you want, Mira? He asks softly. Her gaze flickers from the envelope to him, then to Luca and Najiya. She doesn't answer with anger or relief, only with the quiet tremor that precedes a choice. And in that tremor, the possibility of what might come, of honesty shared, of trust renegotiated, of boundaries kept and yet not ending, hangs in the air, unresolved. The question lingers, unanswered, as if the room itself waits for her next word to unlock the future. The private studio breathes in quiet neon, the city's pulse pressing against the glass. The locked envelope sits between them like a hinge, a quiet dare to break or keep faith. Mira stands near the window, the street lamp tracing her jawline with a deliberate, almost reverent light. Alex sits opposite, hands loose on the table, the weight of a decision pressing into the spine of his shirt. We can pretend this is nothing, he says finally, not raising his voice, just letting the truth surface. Or we can name it and choose what comes after. Mira's breath stutters. Choose what comes after has never sounded so small and yet so perilous. The air between them thickens with what is unsaid. The memory of a touch, the shadow of a kiss that never happened, the verses of a life they both pretend to ignore. Alex loops his fingers, looks at the envelope. This sealed thing between us, he continues, is a boundary, not a weapon. It's a reminder of what I owe you. The right to know, to decide, to walk away if that's what you need. I won't keep you in the dark for the sake of comfort. Mira steps closer to the glass, the city's glare bending around her. And you? She asks, voice even but wary. What boundary do you set for yourself after all the confessions, after the noise of rumors and risk? He meets her gaze, steady. That I will be honest at every turn, and I will protect you from the collateral impact of this. I won't leak what isn't yours to own, and I won't pretend the truth isn't mine to tell. If the truth must cross a line, It crosses with care. He lifts the envelope's lid mentally, not moving it, letting the metaphor breathe. The line is this: we do not fracture the lives that belong to others for our own relief. If you want to read what I am not ready to say aloud, you'll have the key, and only if you want it. Najiya's voice intrudes from somewhere beyond the glass walls of the studio, calm and practical. But she is not here. The moment is Alex's and Mira's, weighed by consequence. The envelope remains locked, a living symbol of the choice they must make about what remains private and what becomes shared. Mira studies him for a long breath, then nods, almost imperceptibly. Boundaries aren't cages, she says, almost a vow. If they're honest, they might offer a way through. The room holds, the hum of the city thick with possibility and risk. The door doesn't swing open, the future does not resolve. It settles into a question, hovering between the two of them as the neon flickers and the envelope waits, unbreached. Will they keep the promise of care? Or will desire slip through the crack and redefine what they can endure? Rain-stitched, rain-spotted patterns along the studio glass, the city beyond a slow, patient pulse. A single lamp through a warm, conspiratorial circle on the table, where a crisp envelope lay like a hinge between two strangers who once believed they understood each other. Mira's eyes kept returning to it, then to him, as if the weight of the seal could swallow a confession whole. Alex kept his hands loose on the table, not touching the envelope, not touching Mira. The room hummed with the soft edits of a life he had tried to choreograph. Laughter edited out, silence kept in, until the weight of what could not be said pressed at his ribs. He spoke not to reveal, but to choose. Mira, we aren't secrets in a story anymore. We're people who have to live with the consequences of what we do next. Her breath hitched, and for a moment the air between them held its breath too. The temptation to name everything, to spill the ache of every late night, every rationalization, was an ache she carried with grace, not bravado. You want a boundary? She said softly, eyes on the envelope as if it were a trap she could step over or around. Not a loophole, a line. Tell me where it begins, Alex. The word line hung like a held breath. Najiya's practical, compassionate logic had told him a line would save lives. Luca's voice had insisted honesty was the only freedom that wouldn't hollow someone out. The envelope wavered under the lamplight, catching it in a small, cruel glow, a literal hinge on which their futures might rotate. He had imagined opening it would absolve him, that truth would feel like a release. Instead, it felt like a test he hadn't studied for. I won't give you up, he admitted, and the phrase tasted like a half-truth he couldn't swallow whole. I won't pretend I don't feel what I feel, but I won't pretend I can shelter you from the world's judgment or from the consequences of my life choices. If we move forward, we do it with transparency, not secrecy. If you walk away, I'll honor that, without dragging your name into a rumor mill you didn't ask to join. Her throat worked. The firelight turned the color of her skin into something almost lit from within. And if I want to stay? If I want to see whether trust can exist in this carefully measured space you're describing? He found the courage to meet her gaze. Then we define the space together in the space. No more hidden doors. No more whispered plans behind closed doors. We tell the truth about what we are, and we guard the things around us that could be harmed by what we become. He looked at the locked envelope as if it might answer for him. It remained quiet, a quiet dare. Do not break the trust you owe them. Do not pretend this is a harmless impulse. The room settled again, the city's neon bleeding through the glass like a reluctant memory. Mira's fingers brushed the envelope's edge, hesitant, almost reverent. "So the truth isn't a sledgehammer," she said, half to him, half to the life she had built around herself, "but a compass with two directions. Do you truly believe it can point us both at the same place without tearing us apart?" He didn't promise a seamless future. He offered a path, worn and cautious, illuminated by the knowledge that honesty without care could still be ruinous, and care without truth could wreck them anyway. "Yes," he whispered, the word almost a prayer. "If we guard what we choose to tell and how we tell it. If we name the costs and still walk toward them together." The symbol surfaced in his sentence, as if drawn from the room itself. The envelope, still sealed, still heavy, seemed to lean toward Mira, inviting her to test the boundary with a touch, to turn possibility into commitment. She did not touch it. Instead, she laid a hand over his, palm meeting palm, thin and brave. The lamp's glow traced the line of her jaw, the soft edge of resolve, and something in him shifted from doubt to a careful, hopeful steadiness. "Then we start there," she said, almost to the envelope, almost to the city, almost to the future they hadn't earned yet. "We start there and see what honesty makes possible." The question hung, unanswerable in the pale hours of their making. If they pressed forward with unguarded honesty, would the world grant them room to breathe? Or would the very truth become a second judgment to bear? The room's quiet thickened around it, and the locked envelope remained a hinge. Not the answer, but the promise of one growing. Outside, a siren began far away, a reminder that the night beyond the glass would not stay still. Inside, the two of them rose toward a future that might still crumble, or might finally hold. The final choice was theirs to live, their own, every day, with the careful care that could still forgive. And the city continued to listen, the question lingering in the air. Will honesty and boundary sustain them, or will the world demand a different confession?